All right, listen up, network defenders, DevSecOps engineers, and sysadmins. Consider this a Code Ninja security advisory. We are completely bypassing the standard introductions today because we are actively tracking a critical data plane vulnerability in NGINX. We're looking at CVE 2026-42946, and it's a live threat to your infrastructure's memory integrity. This explainer is designed to give you immediate, actionable mitigation strategies and to force vendor patches across your perimeter. We operate under the strict principles of coordinated vulnerability disclosure to protect the broader ecosystem, so let's get right into exactly what we're dealing with here. To really grasp the urgency of this, we've got to look at the rapid sequence of events surrounding the disclosure. On May 13, 2026, F5 Networks, acting as the CVE numbering authority, published their initial security advisory. Right alongside that, the National Vulnerability Database officially published the CVU record. This discovery actually comes from security researcher Zhenpeng Lin, who goes by Leo over at Depth First. By May 14th, the security community was already scrambling to provide detection capabilities, with Tenable pushing out a specific Nessus plugin. And literally the next day, May 15th, we saw upstream Linux distributions like Debian actively tracking the unpatched packages in their ecosystems, along with refined tooling updates. This incredibly compressed timeline tells us one thing for sure. Defenders need to act on this fresh intelligence immediately because the window between disclosure and weaponization is closing fast. Now, I want you to focus strictly on this number right here, 8.3. That is the CVSS version 4.0 base score assigned to this vulnerability by F5 Networks, putting it solidly in the high severity category. Now sure, older scoring systems like CVSS 3.1 rated this as a 6.5 medium, but the modern 4.0 framework recognizes the massive threat this poses specifically to the data plane. It's absolutely crucial to understand the architecture we're talking about. There is no control plane exposure with this vulnerability, zero. This is exclusively a data plane issue. But because the data plane is where your actual application traffic, your session tokens, and your sensitive payloads live, a compromise here can be totally catastrophic. An 8.3 score means you literally cannot afford to just leave this sitting in your backlog. Before we tear into the actual technical payload, we need to establish a secure comms link. If you're the one responsible for maintaining digital perimeters, consider this an early call to action and a mandatory security protocol. Step 1. Subscribe to @cybertech79 and enable notifications to secure your real-time intelligence link. You know how it is in our line of work? Missing an advisory by just a few hours can be the difference between a secure perimeter and a completely compromised network. Step 2, drop a like on this explainer to formally ACK or acknowledge receipt of this intelligence. We need to confirm this telemetry is actually reaching the front lines. And while we're running that comms check, we need to conduct a quick blast radius census. I want you to sound off in the comments right now with your infrastructure status. Are your NGINX nodes already patched, or are you sitting on vulnerable configurations? We actually use this data to gauge the real-world blast radius of these vulnerabilities across the community. When you share your status, you're helping other defenders understand the true scope of the threat landscape we're all navigating right now. Okay, let's get into the actual protocol here. We're looking at the attack mechanics and your infrastructure exposure. System administrators, lean in for this part, because we're breaking down the two specific weakness enumerations that act as the root causes for this whole vulnerability. So, the first root cause we're tracking is CWE 789. In plain English, that's memory allocation with an excessive size value. In the context of NGINX, this happens when the software allocates memory based on a size value that just hasn't been properly verified. Think about it like this. If an attacker can manipulate the responses coming from an upstream backend server, they can feed an untrusted, deliberately massive size value back to the NGINX reverse proxy. The NGINX worker process blindly trusts this manipulated upstream response, and it's forced to over-allocate memory. That is step 1 in the exploit chain.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because that first weakness feeds directly into the second one, CW823, or use of out-of-range pointer offset. Because that memory allocation we just talked about was corrupted by the excessive size value, the software ends up using a pointer to read outside of its intended safe memory buffer. This is where the actual damage goes down. This out-of-range read leads straight to the unauthorized disclosure of sensitive NGINX worker process memory. Or, alternatively, the resulting memory corruption can just straight up crash the worker process, forcing a restart and causing a localized denial of service.
But what does an attacker actually need to pull this off? It's absolutely crucial to understand the exact environmental conditions here. This isn't just a simple fire-and-forget remote code execution over the open web. The vulnerability specifically targets two modules, the NGX_HTTP_SCGI module. and the NGINX_HTTP_UWSGI module. Your infrastructure is only at risk if you actively have the SCGI pass or UWSGI pass directives configured to route traffic. On top of that, an unauthenticated attacker has to successfully achieve a man-in-the-middle position between your NGINX proxy and your backend servers. They've got to be perfectly positioned to intercept and control those upstream responses before they ever hit the NGINX worker process. So, are you running a vulnerable version? Let's check the official vendor matrix from F5. If you're a DevSecOps engineer running these specific versions, your perimeters are exposed as we speak. For NGINX Plus, if you're on branches R32 through R36, you're vulnerable. You need to apply the fixes introduced in R36P4 or R32P6 immediately. For those of you running NGINX open source, the net is cast incredibly wide here. It spans all the way from version 1.00 up to 130.0. The secured fixed versions you want to deploy are 1.31.0 or 1.30.1. Please go verify your versions in your deployment pipelines the second this explainer is over.
And of course, we have to look at how vulnerabilities cascade down the supply chain, right? Because a lot of organizations don't compile NGINX from source. They just pull it straight from their OS package manager. According to the Debian Security Tracker, if you're relying on default packages in the Bullseye, Bookworm, Trixie, or Forky branches, your deployments are silently compromised right now. They are still vulnerable. Currently, only the SID unstable branch has received the fixed 1.30.0-4 package. Look, if you rely on OS-level package managers, do not assume a standard apt update command is going to save you today. You have to manually verify that package version against the CVE.
All right, let's talk remediation. You essentially have two mitigation strategies here, and I want to contrast them directly. The primary, most effective defense is obviously official vendor patch application, meaning you upgrade to those fixed NGINX versions we literally just reviewed. But we know how it goes in complex enterprise environments. Sometimes immediate patching is just operationally impossible. If that's your situation, you have to implement the secondary strategy, securing the upstream backend. Because there's no configuration workaround within NGINX itself to neutralize this bug, your only viable defense is to defeat the attacker's man-in-the-middle capability. You must enforce strict TLS transport encryption between your NGINX reverse proxy and your SCGI or UWSGI upstream servers. If the attacker can't read or manipulate the intercepted response, the exploit chain is totally broken.
Now, you obviously can't protect what you can't see. To hunt down shadow infrastructure running vulnerable packages, you have to lean on detection engineering. Tenable has been quick on the draw here, deploying Nessus plugin ID 314517, which is currently on version 1.3. This local check actively hunts down unpatched Linux and Unix hosts inside your network that are susceptible to this exact CVE. I am strongly advising all defenders to integrate this specific plugin across their continuous scanning pipelines today. You've got to make sure no vulnerable nodes are hiding in the dark corners of your data plane.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to briefly touch on the ethics of this disclosure. Sounding the alarm on vulnerabilities isn't about causing a panic. It's a fundamental necessity for keeping the internet secure. As the official documentation states, users need to know to protect their systems. F5 rightly acknowledged researcher Leo Lin for following the highest standards of coordinated vulnerability disclosure. Finding the flaw is only half the battle, guys. Responsibly bringing it to the vendor, giving them time to develop a patch, and then rapidly notifying the global defender community, that is the exact process that keeps our digital infrastructure standing.
So your action items are clear. Audit your configurations for SGI pass and UWSGI pass. Check your version numbers against that vulnerability matrix and either apply the patch or lock down your upstream transport layer with TLS immediately. The exploit is fully documented, the patches are live, and the clock is ticking. You have to ask yourself, what hidden vulnerabilities are lurking in your data planes right now, just waiting for an unencrypted upstream connection to be intercepted? Find them before the adversaries do. Execute your patches, stay secure.